Derek never imagined that a simple anniversary lunch for his wife, Lisa, would lead to a moment that would turn their world upside down. Arriving at the restaurant, he found Lisa, heavily pregnant, forced to wait outside in the scorching heat, her eyes reflecting both strength and vulnerability. Overcome with frustration and concern, he rushed to her side, unaware that this moment of injustice would spark a chain of events that would change everything. What truth lies hidden behind this encounter, and how will it reshape their lives? Stay tuned to follow their journey of love, perseverance, and standing up for what's right. Let us know where you're watching from, and if this story speaks to you, don't forget to subscribe for more. The sun hung high in the cloudless sky, casting a warm glow over the winding country road. Lisa gazed out the window of the sleek black car, her hand resting gently on her swollen belly. At 8 months pregnant, every movement was a careful consideration, but today's outing was worth the effort. It was her 5th wedding anniversary, and her husband Derek had planned something special. "We're almost there, ma'am," the driver announced, catching Lisa's eye in the rearview mirror. "Just around this bend." Lisa nodded, a mix of excitement and nervousness fluttering in her chest. It had been weeks since she'd ventured out, her high-risk pregnancy keeping her mostly homebound. But she was tired of being home all the time, so Derek had insisted on celebrating, promising her a lunch she wouldn't forget. As the car rounded the curve, a stunning vista opened up before them. Nestled atop a hill, overlooking a verdant valley, stood an elegant stone building. Its facade gleamed in the sunlight, large windows reflecting the surrounding landscape. "The Hilltop Haven," Lisa murmured, recognizing the exclusive restaurant from magazine spreads. It was known for its privacy and discretion, a favorite among celebrities and high-profile guests seeking a quiet retreat. The car pulled up to the entrance, a valet rushing forward to open Lisa's door. She took a deep breath, steeling herself for the short walk inside. Her doctor had warned against overexertion, but surely a few steps wouldn't hurt. "Welcome to the Hilltop Haven, ma'am," the valet said, offering his hand. "Would you like assistance?" Lisa smiled, accepting his help. "Thank you, that would be lovely." As she stepped out of the car, Lisa couldn't help but feel a twinge of self-consciousness. Her maternity dress, though elegant, felt out of place among the crisp suits and cocktail attire of the other arriving guests. She pushed the thought aside, reminding herself that she deserved to be here, to celebrate this milestone with her husband. "Your husband asked me to inform you that he's running a few minutes late," the driver said, handing Lisa a small gift box. "He said to go ahead inside, and he'll join you shortly." Lisa nodded, clutching the box to her chest. It was just like Derek to have a surprise waiting for her. "Thank you for the ride," she said, tipping the driver generously. As she made her way to the entrance, Lisa couldn't help but marvel at the restaurant's beauty. Lush gardens surrounded the building, with hidden alcoves and secluded benches offering private spots for conversation. No wonder it was so popular among those seeking discretion. As Lisa stood at the entrance of the Hilltop Haven, she caught sight of a tall, blonde woman approaching from inside. The woman's crisp white blouse and perfectly pressed black skirt exuded an air of authority. Her heels clicked sharply against the polished floor, echoing in the opulent foyer. "Good afternoon," the woman said, her voice clipped and professional. "I'm Madison, the head hostess. How may I assist you today?" Lisa, offering a warm smile, replied, "Hello, Madison. I'm Lisa Thompson. I believe my husband made a reservation for us today. It's our anniversary." Madison's pale blue eyes scanned Lisa from head to toe, lingering for a moment on her pregnant belly before returning to her face. Her expression remained neutral, but there was a hint of something in her gaze that made Lisa feel suddenly self-conscious. "I see," Madison said, her tone cooling noticeably. "And under what name would this reservation be?" "It should be under Derek Thompson," Lisa replied, trying to keep her voice steady. "He made it weeks ago. It's for our 5th anniversary lunch." Madison turned to the sleek tablet in her hands, manicured fingers tapping the screen. After a moment, she looked up, her lips pressed into a thin line. "I'm afraid I don't see any reservation under that name. Are you certain it was for today?" Lisa nodded emphatically. "Yes, I'm positive. Derek's been planning this for weeks. He even arranged a car service to bring me here." "Well," Madison said, her voice taking on a patronizing tone, "I'm sorry, but we're fully booked today. Without a reservation, I'm afraid I can't seat you. Lisa felt her heart sink. This couldn't be happening. Not today of all days. There must be some mistake, she pleaded. Could you please check again? Maybe it's under my name instead? Lisa Thompson. Madison's fingers moved across the tablet once more, but her expression remained unchanged. No, I'm sorry. There's no reservation under either name. But my husband should be here any minute, Lisa said, her voice wavering slightly. He's probably just running a bit late. Couldn't we wait inside? It's quite warm out here, and in my condition, she gestured to her pregnant belly, hoping for some understanding. Madison's gaze flicked briefly to Lisa's midsection, then back to her face. Her expression hardened. I understand you're expecting, ma'am, but I'm afraid I can't make an exception. We have strict policies in place. Without a confirmed reservation, I'll have to ask you to wait outside. Lisa felt a flush of embarrassment creep up her neck. She was acutely aware of the curious glances from other patrons nearby. Please, she said softly, I don't mind waiting. But couldn't I just sit in the lobby? It's so hot out, and my doctor said I should avoid overheating. Madison's lips curved into a smile that didn't reach her eyes. I'm sorry, but our lobby is reserved for guests with confirmed reservations. We have certain standards to maintain. I'm sure you understand. The implication hung in the air, unspoken but clear. Lisa didn't meet those standards. She felt her cheeks burn with a mixture of shame and indignation. What exactly do you mean by standards? She asked, her voice barely above a whisper. Madison's smile tightened. The Hilltop Haven caters to a certain clientele, Mrs. Thompson. We pride ourselves on providing an exclusive atmosphere. I'm sure there are other establishments that might be more suitable for your needs. Lisa opened her mouth to respond, but no words came out. She was stunned by the blatant dismissal, the thinly veiled prejudice in Madison's words. Before she could gather her thoughts, a commotion at the door caught her attention. A group of well-dressed men and women swept into the foyer, their laughter echoing off the high ceilings. They were impeccably groomed, adorned with expensive jewelry and designer clothes. Lisa couldn't help but notice how different they looked from her in her simple maternity dress. Madison's demeanor changed instantly. Her cool professionalism melted away, replaced by warm enthusiasm. Mr. and Mrs. Cartwright, she exclaimed, moving swiftly to greet the newcomers. How wonderful to see you again. Your usual table is ready, of course. Lisa watched in disbelief as Madison ushered the group inside, completely ignoring her presence. The contrast was stark and painful. These people, with their air of wealth and privilege, were welcomed with open arms. Meanwhile, she, pregnant, tired, and increasingly upset, was left standing alone, unwelcome and dismissed. As Madison returned, her expression once again cooled as she addressed Lisa. As you can see, Mrs. Thompson, we are quite busy today. I really must insist that you wait outside for your husband. Perhaps you could take a walk in the gardens? Lisa felt tears prickling at the corners of her eyes. She blinked them back, determined not to break down in front of this woman. I understand, she said, her voice barely audible. I'll wait outside. As she turned to leave, Lisa caught sight of her reflection in one of the large mirrors adorning the foyer. Her dark skin seemed to stand out even more against the pale, polished surroundings. Her pregnant form, which she had always viewed with pride and joy, now felt like a mark of shame in this place that clearly had no room for someone like her. Outside, the sun beat down mercilessly. Lisa found a small bench near the entrance, lowering herself onto it with difficulty. Her back ached, and her feet had begun to swell in the heat. She pulled out her phone, intending to call Derek, only to find the battery dead. A wave of helplessness washed over her. From her seat, Lisa had a clear view of the restaurant's entrance. She watched as guest after guest arrived, each greeted warmly by Madison and escorted inside without hesitation. There were couples celebrating anniversaries, business people in sharp suits, groups of friends out for a fancy lunch. All of them different, yet all apparently meeting the standards that she somehow failed to reach. A young couple caught her attention. The woman was pregnant, perhaps even further along than Lisa. They approached Madison, exchanged a few words, and were immediately shown inside, the hostess fawning over them with offers of extra cushions and a special menu for expectant mothers. The injustice of it all hit Lisa like a physical blow. What made that couple different from her and Derek? Was it the color of their skin? The cut of their clothes? The invisible aura of wealth and privilege that seemed to surround them? As the minutes ticked by, Lisa's discomfort grew. The bench offered little support for her aching back, and the heat was becoming unbearable. She shifted, trying to find a more comfortable position, but it was futile. A dull ache spread across her lower back, and she felt a flutter of worry. Her doctor had warned her about overexertion and stress. A group of women exited the restaurant, their laughter carrying across the courtyard. They were dressed in expensive-looking sundresses, oversized sunglasses perched on their perfectly coiffed heads. One of them glanced in Lisa's direction, her smile faltering for a moment before she quickly looked away, whispering something to her companions. Lisa felt her cheeks burn anew. She was acutely aware of how she must look. Sweaty, disheveled, clearly out of place in this world of luxury and exclusivity. She rubbed her belly soothingly, as much for her own comfort as for the baby's. "It's okay," she murmured. "Daddy will be here soon, and we'll sort this all out." But as another half hour crawled by, Lisa's optimism began to waver. Where was Derek? It wasn't like him to be this late, especially not today. Had something happened? An accident? A work emergency? Her mind raced with possibilities, each more worrying than the last. Just as she was considering asking someone, anyone, for help, Madison emerged from the restaurant. For a moment, Lisa's hopes soared. Perhaps they had found the reservation after all. But Madison walked right past her, not even sparing a glance in her direction. "Excuse me," Lisa called out, her voice stronger than she felt. "I'm sorry to bother you again, but is there any chance you could check on my reservation one more time? Or perhaps let me use your phone to call my husband?" Madison turned, her expression a mixture of annoyance and barely concealed disdain. "Mrs. Thompson, as I explained earlier, we have no reservation under your name. We're fully booked, and I'm afraid I can't allow you to use our phone for personal calls. Perhaps it would be best if you found somewhere else to wait for your husband." The dismissal was clear, the message unmistakable. Lisa was not welcome here. The realization hit her like a physical blow, leaving her breathless and fighting back tears. I understand," she managed to say, her voice barely above a whisper. "Thank you for your time." As Madison walked away, Lisa felt utterly alone. The beautiful restaurant, the lush surroundings, the promise of a perfect anniversary celebration. It all seemed like a cruel joke now. She was an outsider, unwanted and unwelcome in this world of luxury and exclusivity. With a heavy heart, Lisa struggled to her feet. Her back protested, and she had to pause for a moment, steadying herself against the bench. Where would she go? How would she get home? And where, oh where, was Derek? As she stood there, uncertain and afraid, a sleek sports car pulled up to the valet stand. A well-dressed man stepped out, his confident stride, an easy smile marking him as someone accustomed to places like this. He caught sight of Lisa, his eyes widening slightly as he took in her pregnant form and distressed expression. For a moment, their eyes met. Lisa saw a flicker of something concerned, pity, cross his face. But then he looked away, hurrying inside without a backward glance. The message was clear. Lisa didn't belong here, and everyone knew it. Madison appeared as if by magic, greeting the man with a warm smile and a touch on the arm. "Mr. Carter, how lovely to see you again. Your usual table is ready, of course. And may I say, that new Armani suit is absolutely stunning on you." Lisa watched as Mr. Carter was escorted inside, Madison's laughter at something he said drifting back to her. The contrast between her treatment and his was so stark, so blatant, that Lisa felt a surge of anger cutting through her despair. She took a deep breath, squaring her shoulders as best she could. With as much dignity as she could muster, Lisa approached Madison once more. "Excuse me," she said, her voice steady despite the emotions roiling inside her. "I'd like to speak to your manager, please." Madison turned, her smile fading as she recognized Lisa. "I'm afraid that won't be possible, Mrs. Thompson. Our manager is very busy, and as I've explained, we simply can't accommodate you without a reservation." I understand that, Lisa replied, fighting to keep her voice calm. But I believe I've been treated unfairly, and I'd like to discuss it with someone in charge. Madison's eyes narrowed slightly. Mrs. Thompson, I've been more than patient with you, but I'm going to have to ask you to leave now. If you continue to cause a disturbance, I'll be forced to call security. Lisa felt as if she'd been slapped. Cause a disturbance? She repeated, her voice rising slightly. All I've done is ask to be treated with basic respect and dignity. Is that really too much to ask? A few nearby guests turned to look, curiosity and discomfort evident on their faces. Madison's expression hardened. Please lower your voice, Mrs. Thompson. You're making a scene? A scene? Lisa laughed, though there was no humor in it. You've left a pregnant woman standing in the heat for over an hour, denied her basic courtesy, and implied that she doesn't meet your standards. And I'm the one making a scene? Madison glanced around nervously, clearly aware of the attention they were attracting. Mrs. Thompson, I'm warning you. Leave now, or I will call security. Lisa opened her mouth to respond, but at that moment, a sharp pain lanced through her abdomen. She gasped, doubling over slightly. Madison's eyes widened, a flicker of genuine concern crossing her face for the first time. Mrs. Thompson, are you all right? She asked, her voice losing some of its edge. Lisa straightened slowly, one hand pressed to her belly. I'm fine, she said through gritted teeth. No thanks to you or this place. With that, Lisa turned and began to walk away. She could feel Madison's eyes on her back, could sense the stares of the other guests. But she kept her head high, refusing to let them see how deeply their treatment had hurt her. As she reached the edge of the property, Lisa paused, looking back at the elegant stone building. Through the windows, she could see people laughing, enjoying their meals, celebrating life's moments big and small. It was everything she and Derek had wanted for their anniversary, everything she had been denied. I hope you're all proud of yourselves, she whispered, her voice breaking. I hope you sleep well tonight, knowing how you treat people who don't fit your idea of who belongs. With those words, Lisa turned away from the Hilltop Haven, from the shattered remains of her anniversary plans, and began the long, lonely walk down the winding country road. Her feet ached, her back screamed in protest, but she pressed on, one hand cradling her swollen belly, the other still clutching the small gift box, a bitter reminder of the celebration that wasn't meant to be. As Lisa disappeared around the bend, the sun began to dip lower in the sky, casting long shadows across the manicured lawns of the Hilltop Haven. Inside, the restaurant hummed with activity, patrons blissfully unaware of the hurt and injustice that had unfolded just beyond their view. And somewhere out there, Derek was still on his way, unaware that his carefully planned surprise had gone so terribly wrong, that his wife was walking alone on a deserted road, feeling more isolated and unwelcome than she ever had before. As Lisa disappeared around the bend of the winding country road, the sun dipped lower in the sky, casting long shadows across the manicured lawns of the Hilltop Haven. The elegant stone building stood as a silent witness to the injustice that had unfolded, its windows gleaming with the warm light of celebration, a stark contrast to the darkness settling in Lisa's heart. She had barely made it a quarter-mile down the road when the realization of her predicament hit her like a tidal wave. The Hilltop Haven was aptly named, perched atop a secluded hill far from any other establishments. Lisa's steps faltered as she gazed at the empty stretch of road ahead, not a building or even a gas station in sight. "Oh, God," she whispered, her hand instinctively cradling her swollen belly. "What am I going to do?" As if in response to her distress, a sharp pain lanced through her abdomen, causing her to double over. Lisa gasped, bracing herself against a nearby tree. Her doctor's words echoed in her mind, a stern warning given just days ago. "Lisa, your pregnancy is high risk. You need to avoid any prolonged standing or walking. The strain could lead to complications." Tears of frustration and fear welled up in her eyes. She was stuck between a rock and a hard place, unable to leave, yet unwelcome to stay. The private car service Derek had arranged was long gone. With her phone dead, she had no way to contact the driver or call for help. Taking a deep breath, Lisa squared her shoulders and turned back towards the restaurant. As much as she hated the idea of returning to a place that had treated her so poorly, she knew she had no choice. Her baby's well-being had to come first. Inside the Hilltop Haven, Madison, the head hostess, was recounting her interaction with Lisa to Tom, the restaurant manager. Tom, a man in his late 40s with salt and pepper hair and a perpetual frown, listened with a mixture of annoyance and indifference. And then she had the audacity to demand to speak to you, Madison concluded, her voice dripping with disdain. Can you believe it? Tom sighed, running a hand through his thinning hair. These people never understand that places like ours have standards to maintain. Did you make it clear that she wasn't welcome? Madison nodded emphatically. Oh, absolutely. I told her she'd have to wait outside. I even threatened to call security when she started making a scene. Tom's frown deepened. Good. The last thing we need is for our regulars to feel uncomfortable. Mr. Carter just arrived, and you know how much he values his privacy. Their conversation was interrupted by the sound of the front door opening. Both Tom and Madison turned, their expressions morphing from irritation to shock as they saw Lisa stumble back inside, her face pale and drawn. Excuse me, Lisa said, her voice barely above a whisper. I hate to bother you again, but I really need help. Is there any way I could sit down somewhere? I'm not feeling well. Madison opened her mouth, likely to deliver another cutting remark, but Tom held up a hand to silence her. He approached Lisa, his face a mask of professional concern that didn't quite reach his eyes. Mrs. Thompson, was it? He asked, his tone polite but cool. I understand you're having some difficulty today. While we sympathize with your situation, I'm afraid we simply can't accommodate guests without reservations. It's against our policy. Lisa felt a wave of dizziness wash over her. She swayed slightly, reaching out to steady herself against a nearby column. Please, she pleaded, her voice cracking. I'm not asking to be served. I just need a place to sit down. My doctor said I shouldn't be on my feet for too long, and I'm starting to feel faint. Tom's expression remained impassive. I'm sorry, but our seating is reserved for paying customers. Perhaps you could wait in your car? I don't have a car, Lisa explained, fighting back tears. My husband arranged for a car service, and I was supposed to leave with him in his car. Please, I have nowhere else to go. For a moment, something like sympathy flickered in Tom's eyes. But then he glanced over at a group of well-dressed patrons who were watching the exchange with barely concealed curiosity. His face hardened once more. Mrs. Thompson, while I understand your predicament, we have a business to run and an image to maintain. I'm going to have to insist that you wait outside. Lisa felt as if she'd been slapped. An image to maintain, she repeated, her voice rising slightly. Is that image more important than basic human decency? Than the health of a pregnant woman and her unborn child? Tom's jaw clenched. Mrs. Thompson, please lower your voice. You're disturbing our other guests. Good, Lisa exclaimed, beyond caring about decorum now. Let them be disturbed. Let them see how this place treats people who don't fit their narrow definition of who belongs here. A hush fell over the restaurant as heads turned to watch the confrontation. Lisa could feel the weight of their stares, some curious, some disapproving, a few even sympathetic. But no one stepped forward to help. Tom leaned in close, his voice low and threatening. Mrs. Thompson, this is your final warning. Leave now, or I will be forced to call the authorities and have you removed for trespassing. Lisa opened her mouth to respond, but another wave of dizziness washed over her. The room began to spin, and she felt her knees buckle. As she started to fall, she dimly heard gasps and exclamations from the watching crowd. Just before she hit the ground, strong arms caught her. Lisa looked up, expecting to see Tom or one of the other staff members. Instead, she found herself gazing into the concerned face of a stranger. Whoa there, he said gently, helping Lisa to a nearby bench. Are you all right, ma'am? Lisa nodded weakly, grateful for the support. Thank you, she murmured. I need to sit down for a moment. The man turned to Tom, his expression thunderous. What's going on here? Why wasn't this woman offered a seat before now? Tom straightened, clearly recognizing the man. Mr. Hawthorne, I apologize for the disturbance. This woman doesn't have a reservation, and we were just explaining our policies to her. Mr. Hawthorne's eyes narrowed. Your policies? Does the Hilltop Haven have a policy against basic human kindness now, Tom? Tom sputtered, caught off guard by the rebuke. Of course not, Mr. Hawthorne. But we have standards to maintain, and… Standards? Mr. Hawthorne interrupted, his voice sharp. What standards are those exactly? The standard of turning away a pregnant woman in distress. The standard of valuing appearance over compassion. He turned to Lisa, his voice softening. Ma'am, I apologize on behalf of this establishment. Please, allow me to offer you my table. I insist. Before Tom or Madison could protest, Mr. Hawthorne was guiding Lisa towards his private dining room, shooting glares at any staff member who looked like they might object. As they entered the luxurious space, Lisa felt a rush of relief wash over her. She sank gratefully into a plush chair, closing her eyes for a moment as she tried to collect herself. Thank you, she said again, looking up at Mr. Hawthorne. You have no idea how much this means to me. Mr. Hawthorne waved off her thanks. It's the least I could do. I'm ashamed I didn't step in sooner. May I ask your name? Lisa, she replied. Lisa Thompson. I was supposed to be meeting my husband here for our anniversary, but… She trailed off, fighting back a fresh wave of tears. Mr. Hawthorne's expression softened further. Lisa, I'm so sorry this happened to you. Please order whatever you'd like. It's on me. As a waiter hurried over, clearly eager to please Mr. Hawthorne, Lisa felt a glimmer of hope. Maybe things would turn out all right after all. Meanwhile, outside the restaurant, a sleek black car pulled up to the valet stand. Derek Thompson stepped out, his face creased with worry. He had been trying to reach Lisa for hours, growing increasingly frantic as his calls went straight to voicemail. The urgent business meeting that had delayed him had been a nightmare, a potential client threatening to pull out of a major deal at the last minute. Derek had been caught in a whirlwind of negotiations, unable to step away even for a moment to inform his wife of the delay. Now, as he hurried towards the entrance of the Hilltop Haven, Derek's heart was racing. He had planned this anniversary surprise for weeks, wanting everything to be perfect for Lisa. The thought of her waiting alone, possibly thinking he had forgotten or abandoned her, made him sick to his stomach. As Derek approached the door, he caught sight of Tom and Madison engaged in a heated discussion near the hostess stand. He overheard snippets of their conversation, something about a disturbance and an unwelcome guest. Excuse me, Derek interrupted, his voice tight with anxiety. I'm looking for my wife, Lisa Thompson. We had a reservation for today. Has she arrived? Tom and Madison exchanged a look that made Derek's blood run cold. There was guilt there, and something else, a flicker of fear. Madison cleared her throat. Mr. Thompson, I'm afraid there's been a misunderstanding. We didn't have any reservation under that name. And… What do you mean, no reservation? Derek demanded, his voice rising. I made it myself, weeks ago. Where is my wife? Tom stepped forward, attempting to smooth over the situation. Sir, please calm down. There was a woman here earlier who claimed to have a reservation, but as we explained to her… Derek's face paled. Explain? What did you explain to her? Where is she now? Before Tom could respond, a commotion from inside the restaurant caught their attention. Mr. Hawthorne emerged from his private dining room, his face thunderous. You should be ashamed of yourselves, he bellowed, pointing at Tom and Madison. The way you treated that poor woman is disgraceful. I've been coming to the Hilltop Haven for years, but after today, I can assure you I won't be returning. Derek felt his heart stop. What woman? He asked, his voice barely above a whisper. Please, tell me what happened. Mr. Hawthorne turned to Derek, his expression softening as he took in the younger man's distress. Are you Lisa's husband? Derek nodded, unable to speak. She's inside, Mr. Hawthorne said gently. She's all right, but she's been through quite an ordeal. These people, he glared at Tom and Madison, left her standing outside in the heat for hours. Refused to let her wait inside, or even use the phone to call you. Derek felt a wave of rage wash over him. He turned to Tom and Madison, his eyes blazing. You did what? Madison took a step back, her earlier bravado evaporating in the face of Derek's anger. Mr. Thompson, please understand. We have certain standards here, and your wife? Well, she didn't quite fit the image we try to maintain. The words hung in the air, their implications clear. Derek felt as if he'd been punched in the gut. The image you try to maintain, he repeated, his voice dangerously low. And what image is that exactly? One of exclusivity? Of prejudice? Of cruelty? Tom attempted to intervene. Now, Mr. Thompson, I'm sure we can come to some sort of understanding. Perhaps we could offer you and your wife a complimentary meal to make up for any inconvenience. Inconvenience? Derek exploded. You left my pregnant wife standing in the heat for hours. You refused her basic courtesy and kindness. And you think a free meal will make up for that? He took a deep breath, trying to calm himself. I want to see my wife. Now. Mr. Hawthorne nodded, leading Derek towards his private dining room. As they walked, he filled Derek in on the details of what had transpired. When they entered the room, Derek's heart clenched at the sight of Lisa. She was pale and drawn, her eyes red-rimmed from crying. But as soon as she saw him, her face lit up with relief. "Derek!" she exclaimed, struggling to her feet. Derek rushed to her side, enveloping her in a gentle embrace. "Oh, Lisa," he murmured, his voice thick with emotion. "I'm so sorry. I should have been here. I should have protected you from this." Lisa clung to him, finally allowing herself to break down. "I was so scared," she sobbed. "I didn't know where you were, and they wouldn't let me inside, and I started feeling faint." Derek held her close, murmuring words of comfort and apology. As he listened to Lisa recount her ordeal, he felt his anger towards the restaurant staff rekindling. A steely resolve settled in his eyes. He gently helped her back into her seat, then turned to face the restaurant staff who had gathered at the entrance of the private dining room, curiosity and concern etched on their faces. "I think it's time we cleared up a few things," Derek said, his voice low but carrying an unmistakable edge of authority. He straightened his posture, and suddenly, the young man in a business suit transformed before their eyes into someone far more imposing. "My name is Derek Thompson," he announced, his gaze sweeping across the assembled staff. "And I am the new owner of this restaurant chain." A collective gasp rippled through the crowd. Madison, who had been hovering near the back, felt the color drain from her face. Tom, the manager, looked as if he'd been struck by lightning. Derek had recently acquired this hotel chain and wanted to surprise and celebrate with his wife on their anniversary. Derek's eyes narrowed as he focused on Madison. "You," he said, pointing directly at her. "You're the one who left my wife standing outside for hours, aren't you?" Madison's mouth opened and closed, but no sound came out. She looked like a fish out of water, desperately grasping for words that wouldn't come. I didn't know," she finally stammered. "Mr. Thompson, if I had any idea Any idea of what?" Derek cut her off, his voice sharp. "That she was my wife? That I own this place? Tell me, does that change how you should have treated her?" Madison's eyes darted around the room, seeking support or escape, finding neither. "No, sir," she whispered, her voice barely audible. Derek nodded, his expression grim. "You're right. It doesn't. Every single person who walks through those doors deserves to be treated with respect and kindness. The fact that you couldn't see that you judged my wife based on her appearance or what you assumed about her status, that's not something I can overlook." He took a deep breath, then delivered the blow. "You're fired, Madison. Effective immediately. Please gather your things and leave." Madison's face crumpled, but Derek had already turned his attention to Tom. The manager seemed to shrink under Derek's gaze. "And you," Derek said, his disappointment palpable. "Tom, as a manager, one would think that you would be able to uphold the values that this chain is built upon. How could you allow this to happen? Especially when you knew about my wife's condition." Tom swallowed hard. "Mr. Thompson, I made a mistake. I should have handled the situation differently." "A mistake?" Derek repeated, his voice rising. "A mistake is overcooking a steak or mixing up an order. This was a failure of leadership, Tom. A failure of basic human decency." He shook his head, his disappointment evident. "You won't be fired today, Tom. But make no mistake, there will be a full review of your actions, and necessary measures will be taken." As the weight of Derek's words settled over the room, a flurry of activity broke out among the remaining staff. Waiters rushed forward, offering apologies and the best table in the house. The sous chef appeared, promising to prepare any dish Lisa desired, on the house of course. But Lisa, who had been watching the scene unfold with a mixture of awe and discomfort, raised her hand to stop them. "Please," she said, her voice soft but firm. "That's very kind of you all, but it's not necessary." She struggled to her feet, Derek immediately at her side to support her. Lisa looked at each staff member in turn, her gaze steady and filled with a quiet dignity. "The time for special treatment has passed," she continued. "What happened today? It wasn't about me being the owner's wife. It was about how you treat people, all people. Respect and kindness shouldn't be reserved for those with status or connections. They should be given freely to everyone who walks through your doors." A hush fell over the room as Lisa's words sank in. Several staff members lowered their heads, shame coloring their cheeks. Derek squeezed Lisa's hand, pride shining in his eyes. He turned back to address the staff, his voice now calm, but filled with determination. "My wife is right," he said, "and her words will be the foundation of the changes we're going to implement, not just here, but across our entire chain." He paused, making sure he had everyone's attention. "From this day forward, we will be instituting new training programs focused on inclusivity and customer service. We will be revising our policies to ensure that no guest is ever made to feel unwelcome or unworthy, regardless of their appearance, background, or any other factor." Derek's gaze swept across the room once more. "I want each and every one of you to understand this. The measure of this restaurant, of any business, is not in how we treat our most prestigious guests. It's in how we treat every single person who walks through our doors. That is the standard we will hold ourselves to from now on." As Derek finished speaking, a slow applause started from the corner of the room. Mr. Hawthorne, who had been watching the scene unfold with growing approval, stepped forward. "Well said, Mr. Thompson," he nodded. "If you're looking for someone to help implement these changes, I'd be more than happy to offer my expertise. I've been in the hospitality industry for over 30 years, and I believe I could bring some valuable insights to the table." Derek smiled, extending his hand to Mr. Hawthorne. "I'd be honored, sir. And thank you for stepping in when no one else would. You showed the kind of leadership I expect from everyone associated with this establishment." As the two men shook hands, Lisa felt a wave of exhaustion wash over her. She swayed slightly, and Derek was immediately at her side, concern etched on his face. "Lisa, sweetheart, are you all right?" he asked, his arm supporting her waist. Lisa nodded, but her face was pale. "I'm just tired, Derek. It's been a long day." Derek's expression softened. "Of course, love. Let's get you home." He turned to the staff once more. "We'll be leaving now. When I return tomorrow, I expect to see some immediate changes in attitude and behavior. Is that understood?" A chorus of "yes, sir," echoed through the room. As Derek guided Lisa towards the exit, she paused, turning back to the assembled staff. "I hope," she said softly, "that the next time I come here, it will be as just another guest, and that I'll be treated with the same respect and kindness you'd show to anyone else." With those parting words, Derek and Lisa left the Hilltop Haven, leaving behind a chastened staff and the promise of change hanging in the air. As they stepped outside, the cool evening breeze a welcome relief after the emotional heat of the confrontation, Lisa leaned into Derek's embrace. "I'm so sorry, Lisa," Derek murmured, pressing a kiss to her forehead. "This isn't at all how I wanted our anniversary to go. I was going to break the news of acquirement of this hotel chain while celebrating with you on our anniversary, but definitely not under these circumstances." Lisa looked up at him, a small smile playing on her lips despite her exhaustion. "Well, it certainly wasn't boring," she quipped. Derek couldn't help but chuckle. "No, I suppose not. But still, I wanted today to be special for you, for us." Lisa's expression softened. "Derek, listen to me. Today was awful in many ways, yes. But watching you stand up for me, for what's right, seeing you take immediate action to make things better, that's the man I fell in love with. That's the father I want for our child." She placed a hand on her swollen belly. "Our baby is going to grow up in a world that isn't always kind or fair, but they'll have a father who fights to make it better. That's a pretty special anniversary gift, if you ask me." Derek's eyes glistened with unshed tears as he pulled Lisa closer. "I love you so much," he whispered. "Both of you." As they stood there, bathed in the warm glow of the setting sun, a car pulled up beside them. As the driver helped Lisa into the car, Derek paused for a moment, looking back at the Hilltop Haven. The elegant stone building stood silent against the darkening sky, its windows still gleaming with warm light. But now, Derek saw it with new eyes. He saw not just the beauty and luxury, but the responsibility that came with it. He made a silent vow then and there. The Hilltop Haven, and every restaurant in his chain, would become a beacon of inclusivity and kindness. A place where everyone, regardless of who they were or where they came from, would feel welcome and respected. As he slipped into the car beside Lisa, taking her hand in his, Derek felt a renewed sense of purpose. Today had been a harsh wake-up call, but it was also an opportunity. An opportunity to make real, lasting change. So, Lisa said, breaking into his thoughts, "Where to now? I don't know about you, but I could really go for some pizza." Derek laughed, the tension of the day finally breaking. "Pizza it is," he agreed. "And maybe we can swing by that little ice cream shop you love for dessert?" Lisa's eyes lit up. "Now that sounds like a perfect anniversary celebration to me." As the car pulled away from the Hilltop Haven, Derek and Lisa left behind the memory of a difficult day, but took with them the promise of a brighter future. A future where kindness and respect would be the true measure of success, in business and in life. And as they drove into the gathering twilight, hands intertwined, hearts full of love and hope, they knew that no matter what challenges lay ahead, they would face them together. For in the end, it wasn't the grand gestures or elaborate plans that mattered most. It was the simple acts of love, the unwavering support, and the commitment to making the world a little bit better each day. That night, as Derek and Lisa sat in their favorite pizza place, sharing a supreme pizza and laughing over ice cream sundaes, they realized that this unconventional anniversary celebration was, in its own way, perfect. It was a testament to their love, their resilience, and their shared values. And as Derek watched Lisa, her face glowing with happiness despite the trials of the day, he knew that he had indeed given her the best anniversary gift possible, the promise of a better tomorrow, not just for them and their unborn child, but for everyone whose lives they touched. The warm glow of the pizzeria's neon sign cast a soft light on Derek and Lisa's faces as they stepped out into the cool night air. Lisa's hand rested comfortably on her swollen belly, a contented smile playing on her lips. The simple dinner of pizza and ice cream had been a far cry from the elaborate anniversary celebration Derek had originally planned, but somehow, it felt more meaningful, more genuine. As they walked to their car, Derek's phone buzzed insistently in his pocket. He glanced at the screen, his brow furrowing slightly. "Everything okay?" Lisa asked, noticing the change in his expression. Derek nodded, but his eyes were troubled. "It's from the corporate office. They've been going through the Hilltop Haven's records and, well, it seems there's more to Tom's story than we initially thought." Lisa squeezed his hand encouragingly. "Tell me." Derek took a deep breath, his words coming out in a rush. "Apparently, this isn't the first time something like this has happened. They've uncovered a pattern of complaints against Tom, all swept under the rug, of course. Instances of quiet discrimination, of people being turned away or treated poorly because they didn't fit his idea of what a proper Hilltop Haven guest should look like." Lisa's eyes widened. "But how did no one notice before?" "That's the thing," Derek said, his voice tight with frustration. "Tom was careful. He always had an excuse: fully booked nights, dress code violations, reservation mix-ups. And for the most part, he targeted people who he thought wouldn't or couldn't fight back." They reached the car, but neither made a move to get in. The weight of this new information hung heavy between them. "What are you going to do?" Lisa asked softly. Derek ran a hand through his hair, his expression resolute. "What I should have done this afternoon? Tom's fired, effective immediately. I'll make the call first thing in the morning." Lisa nodded, a mixture of sadness and determination in her eyes. "It's the right thing to do, Derek. What happened to me, it can't happen to anyone else." As they drove home, the city lights blurring past their windows, Derek couldn't help but feel a sense of unease. The Hilltop Haven had always been a symbol of luxury and exclusivity. But at what cost? How many people had been hurt, dismissed, or made to feel less than in the pursuit of that image? The next morning dawned bright and clear, a stark contrast to the storm brewing in Derek's mind. He sat at the kitchen table, phone in hand, steeling himself for the conversation ahead. Lisa padded into the kitchen, her robe wrapped snugly around her pregnant form. She placed a comforting hand on Derek's shoulder. "You've got this," she murmured, pressing a kiss to his cheek. Derek nodded, took a deep breath, and dialed. The conversation with Tom was brief, but intense. At first, Tom tried to defend himself, to explain away the pattern of behavior that had been uncovered. But as Derek laid out the evidence, the complaints, the testimonies from staff members, the clear bias in who was welcomed and who was turned away, Tom's excuses crumbled. Derek said, his voice firm, "You used your position to discriminate and exclude. That ends now, Tom. You're terminated, effective immediately." There was a long pause on the other end of the line. When Tom spoke again, his voice was small, defeated. I understand. I'm sorry, Mr. Thompson, for everything." As Derek ended the call, he felt a weight lift from his shoulders. It was a small step, but an important one. The Hilltop Haven, and by extension, the entire chain, would no longer be a place where such behavior was tolerated. Over the next few weeks, Derek threw himself into the task of reimagining the Hilltop Haven. He worked closely with Mr. Hawthorne, whose years of experience in the hospitality industry proved invaluable. Together, they crafted a new vision for the restaurant, one that prioritized inclusivity and genuine hospitality over exclusivity and appearances. The changes were both big and small. The dress code was relaxed, focusing on basic cleanliness and appropriateness rather than designer labels or expensive accessories. The menu was expanded to include a wider range of cuisines and price points, making the restaurant more accessible without sacrificing quality. But perhaps the most significant change was in the staff training. Derek brought in experts on diversity and inclusion to lead workshops for all employees, from the busboys to the executive chef. The message was clear. Every guest, regardless of their appearance, background, or social status, was to be treated with equal respect and warmth. As the due date for their baby approached, Lisa found herself spending more time at home, her body demanding rest as she entered the final stretch of her pregnancy. But she remained keenly interested in the changes happening at the Hilltop Haven, often offering suggestions and insights based on her own experience. One evening, as Derek returned home from a particularly long day at the restaurant, he found Lisa sitting in the nursery, her hands resting on her belly, a thoughtful expression on her face. "Penny for your thoughts?" Derek said softly, leaning against the doorframe. Lisa looked up, a small smile playing on her lips. "I was just thinking about our baby, about the world they're going to be born into." Derek crossed the room, kneeling beside her chair. "And what were you thinking?" "I was thinking about how lucky they are," Lisa said, taking Derek's hand and placing it on her belly. "Lucky to have a father who's not afraid to stand up for what's right, who's actively working to make the world a little bit better." Derek felt a lump form in his throat. "We're both going to do that, Lisa. You and me, together." Just then, they felt a strong kick beneath their joined hands. They laughed, the joy of the moment washing away the serious tone of their conversation. "I think someone agrees," Lisa chuckled. As the weeks passed, the changes at the Hilltop Haven began to take effect. At first, there was some resistance from a few longtime patrons who bristled at the more relaxed atmosphere. But for every complaint, there were dozens of positive responses from new guests who felt truly welcome for the first time. One evening, about a month after the incident with Lisa, Derek was making his rounds in the restaurant when he overheard a conversation that made him pause. "I can't believe we're actually eating here," a woman was saying, her voice filled with wonder. "I always thought this place was off limits to people like us." Derek glanced over, seeing a young couple seated at a corner table. They were dressed simply but neatly, looking slightly out of place among the restaurant's opulent decor, but their faces were alight with excitement as they perused the menu. "Can I help you with anything?" Derek asked, approaching their table with a warm smile. The couple looked up, startled. "Oh no, we're fine," the man said quickly. "Just taking it all in. We've never been anywhere this fancy before." Derek's smile widened. "Well, I hope you enjoy your evening. And please, if there's anything you need, don't hesitate to ask. We're glad to have you here." As he walked away, Derek felt a sense of pride wash over him. This was what the Hilltop Haven should be, a place where everyone could feel special, regardless of their background or bank account. But just as things seemed to be settling into a new, more positive rhythm, life threw Derek and Lisa another curveball. It was a quiet Tuesday evening, and Derek was at the restaurant, overseeing the dinner service. Lisa was at home, resting, with her due date still a few weeks away. Or so they thought. Derek's phone rang, and he felt his heart skip a beat when he saw Lisa's name on the screen. "Lisa, is everything okay?" Her voice came through, tight with a mixture of excitement and anxiety. "Derek, I think it's time. My water just broke." For a moment, Derek felt the world tilt on its axis. Then his training kicked in, both from the childbirth classes they'd attended and his years in business management. Stay calm, assess the situation, take action. "Okay, honey, I'm on my way. Have you called the doctor?" "Yes," she said to head to the hospital. "Derek, I'm scared. It's too early." Derek was already moving, signaling to Mr. Hawthorne to take over as he headed for the exit. "It's going to be okay, Lisa. I'll be there in 10 minutes. Just breathe. Remember what we learned in class. I love you." The drive to their house was a blur, traffic lights and stop signs barely registering as Derek's mind raced. He found Lisa in the bedroom, her hospital bag already packed, her face pale but determined. "Let's go have a baby," she said, managing a smile despite her obvious discomfort. The next few hours were a whirlwind of activity. The hospital, the admitting process, the flurry of nurses and doctors. Through it all, Derek remained by Lisa's side, holding her hand, wiping her brow, murmuring words of encouragement. As the night wore on and Lisa's labor intensified, Derek found himself reflecting on the journey that had brought them to this point. The years of building his business, the unexpected acquisition of the Hilltop Haven, the painful incident that had opened his eyes to the need for change. And through it all, Lisa had been his rock, his moral compass, his partner in every sense of the word. Finally, in the early hours of the morning, with a final, heroic push from Lisa, their child entered the world. The sound of a lusty cry filled the room, and Derek felt his heart swell with a love he had never known before. "It's a girl," the doctor announced, placing the squirming, red-faced bundle on Lisa's chest. Lisa looked up at Derek, tears streaming down her face. "She's perfect," she whispered. Derek nodded, unable to speak past the lump in his throat. He gently stroked his daughter's cheek, marveling at the softness of her skin, the tiny perfection of her features. "What should we name her?" Lisa asked, her voice thick with emotion. Derek thought for a moment, then smiled. "How about Hope? Because that's what she represents. Hope for a better future, for a world where she'll be judged by the content of her character, not the color of her skin or the size of her bank account." Lisa nodded, her eyes shining. "Hope. It's perfect." As the sun rose over the city, painting the hospital room in soft golden light, Derek held his newborn daughter in his arms, Lisa resting peacefully beside them. In that moment, he made a silent vow to his child, to Lisa, and to himself. He would continue to work tirelessly to create a world where Hope, and all children like her, could grow up feeling valued, respected, and welcome everywhere they went. The news of Hope's birth spread quickly, and soon the hospital room was filled with flowers, balloons, and well wishes from friends, family, and even the staff of the Hilltop Haven. Mr. Hawthorne himself stopped by, his gruff exterior softening at the sight of the tiny baby. "She's a beauty," he said, gently touching Hope's tiny hand. "You two should be proud." As the days passed and Lisa and Hope grew stronger, Derek found himself juggling his responsibilities at the restaurant with his new role as a father. It was exhausting, exhilarating work, but he wouldn't have had it any other way. One evening, about a month after Hope's birth, Derek and Lisa decided it was time to introduce their daughter to the Hilltop Haven. They dressed her in a tiny, adorable outfit and made their way to the restaurant, equal parts excited and nervous about how the staff and patrons would react. As they walked through the doors, Derek was struck by how different the atmosphere felt from that day months ago when Lisa had been turned away. The hostess, a young woman named Sarah who had replaced Madison, greeted them with a warm smile. "Mr. and Mrs. Thompson, and this must be little Hope. Welcome." As Sarah led them to their table, Derek noticed the subtle but significant changes that had taken place. The clientele was more diverse, the dress code more relaxed. But more than that, There was a warmth in the air, a genuine feeling of welcome that went beyond mere politeness. They settled into their booth, Hope sleeping peacefully in her carrier. As they perused the menu, now expanded to include a wider range of cuisines and price points, Lisa reached across the table to squeeze Derek's hand. "You've done good, Mr. Thompson," she said softly. "This place, it feels like somewhere anyone could belong." Derek smiled, his heart full. "We did good," he corrected gently. "I couldn't have done any of this without you, Lisa." As they enjoyed their meal, occasionally pausing to coo over Hope or accept congratulations from staff and fellow diners, Derek reflected on the journey that had brought them to this point. The pain and humiliation Lisa had endured that day months ago had been a catalyst for change, not just for the Hilltop Haven, but for Derek himself. He thought about Tom, the former manager whose prejudices had caused so much harm. After his firing, Derek had heard through the grapevine that Tom had taken some time for self-reflection. Last he'd heard, Tom was volunteering at a community center, working to make amends for his past behavior. It wasn't a fairy tale ending, but it was a step in the right direction. As for Madison, the hostess who had been so cruel to Lisa, Derek had received a letter from her a few weeks after her termination. In it, she expressed deep remorse for her actions and thanked Derek for opening her eyes to her own biases. She was now working at a small family restaurant, where she said she was learning the true meaning of hospitality. These thoughts were interrupted by a commotion near the entrance. Derek looked up to see a group of people being turned away by Sarah, the hostess. His heart sank, wondering if old habits were creeping back in despite all their efforts. But as he watched, he saw Sarah smile apologetically and gesture towards the packed dining room. "I'm so sorry," he heard her say, "but we're fully booked tonight. Can I take your names for our waiting list? Or perhaps I could recommend some other great restaurants in the area." The group, a mix of people of various ages and backgrounds, nodded understandingly. One of them, an older woman, patted Sarah's hand. "No worries, dear. We'll try again another night. It's just so nice to see this place so busy and welcoming to everyone." Derek felt a surge of pride. This was what he had been working towards, a place where everyone truly was welcome, where the only limit was the physical capacity of the restaurant itself. As the evening wore on and Hope began to fuss, Derek and Lisa prepared to leave. As they made their way to the exit, several staff members and even a few regular patrons stopped to admire the baby and offer their congratulations. Just as they reached the door, an elderly couple entered. The woman, leaning heavily on a cane, looked around with wide eyes. "Oh my," she said to her husband. "Remember when we used to come here, George? It's so different now." Derek paused, curious to hear more. The man, George, nodded. "It sure is, Ethel. But look how lively it is. And such a mix of people. It's nice to see." Ethel smiled, her eyes twinkling. "You're right, dear. It feels warmer somehow, more welcoming." As Derek held the door open for the couple, he felt a sense of accomplishment wash over him. This was the true measure of their success, not in dollars and cents, but in the smiles of people who finally felt welcome in a place that had once seemed out of reach. That night, as Derek and Lisa put Hope to bed in her nursery, they stood for a moment, arms around each other, watching their daughter sleep. "You know," Lisa said softly, "when I was standing outside the Hilltop Haven that day, feeling so alone and unwelcome, I never could have imagined we'd end up here." Derek pulled her closer, pressing a kiss to her temple. "I'm so sorry you had to go through that, Lisa. But I'm grateful, in a way. It opened my eyes to things I should have seen long before." Lisa nodded, her hand reaching out to gently stroke Hope's cheek. "And now our daughter will grow up in a world that's a little bit better, a little bit kinder." As they stood there in the quiet of the nursery, Hope sleeping peacefully in her crib, Derek felt a profound sense of purpose. The changes they had made at the Hilltop Haven were just the beginning. There was still so much work to be done, so many minds to open and hearts to change. But looking at his wife and daughter, Derek knew that every effort, every struggle, was worth it. They were creating a legacy of inclusivity and kindness that would ripple out far beyond the walls of one restaurant. As the months passed, the Hilltop Haven became known not just for its excellent cuisine, but for its warm and welcoming atmosphere. The changes Derek and his team had implemented began to influence other restaurants in the chain, and eventually, Even competitors started to take notice. 1 year after the incident that had changed everything, Derek and Lisa decided to host a special event at the Hilltop Haven. They invited a diverse group of people, regular patrons, community leaders, and even some of those who had been turned away in the past. The restaurant was buzzing with energy as Derek stood to address the crowd. Hope, now a cheerful 1-year-old, babbled happily in Lisa's arms. A year ago, Derek began, his voice carrying across the hushed room. This restaurant was a very different place. It was exclusive, yes, but at a terrible cost. We had lost sight of what truly matters in hospitality, making every single person feel welcome and valued. He paused, his eyes finding Lisa's in the crowd. She smiled encouragingly, and he continued. Thanks to my wife, Lisa, whose strength and dignity in the face of discrimination opened my eyes, we've been on a journey of change. It hasn't always been easy, but it has always been right. Derek gestured around the room, at the diverse faces looking back at him. Look around you. This is what the Hilltop Haven was always meant to be, a place where everyone, regardless of their background, can come together to enjoy good food and good company. As applause filled the room, Derek felt a tug on his pant leg. He looked down to see Hope, who had toddled over from Lisa's arms. With a smile, he scooped her up, holding her high for everyone to see. This is my daughter, Hope, he said, his voice thick with emotion. She represents the future we're all working towards. A future where no one is judged by the color of their skin, the size of their wallet, or any other superficial measure. A future where kindness and inclusivity are the norm, not the exception. As the event wound down, Derek and Lisa stood at the door, thanking their guests as they left. The last to leave was Mr. Hawthorne, who had become a close friend and mentor over the past year. You've done good, kids, he said, his gruff voice softened with pride. You've turned this place into something special. As they watched him go, Lisa leaned into Derek's side. We did it, she said softly. Derek nodded, pulling her close. We did, but it's just the beginning. And as they stood there, the warm lights of the Hilltop Haven glowing behind them, Hope sleeping peacefully in her stroller, they knew that they had not just changed a restaurant. They had started a movement, one small act of kindness at a time. The Hilltop Haven stood as a beacon of what was possible when people chose inclusivity over exclusivity, kindness over judgment. And in doing so, it had become more than just a restaurant. It had become a home, for its staff, its patrons, and for the community it served. As Derek and Lisa walked to their car, hand in hand, they knew that whatever challenges the future might hold, they would face them together. And they would continue to work, every day, to make the world a little bit better, a little bit kinder, for Hope, and for all the children who would inherit the world they were building. Their story is a reminder that standing up against injustice can make a real difference, and that compassion and respect should always be at the heart of every interaction. What would you have done in Lisa and Derek's situation? Have you ever faced a moment where you had to stand up for what's right? Let us know in the comments below. And if this story moved you, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe for more tales of courage, compassion, and unexpected twists. Thank you for watching, and we'll see you in the next story.